What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show with me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com. And Cage Warriors are back next Friday and Saturday night with two cards. Again, another duology, as I like to call them, as Cage Warriors 1-3-5 goes down and 1-4-5 as well. A lot of Irish representation on this card, and a lot of the next breed, I suppose, of Irish MMA fighters on this. And I concentrate a lot on them, but we have one title fight. We have an ex-Dana White Contender Series athlete. We have some very, very, very experienced guys on these cards as well. And they're two Ian Dean special cards with maybe not the biggest names on them, or maybe not the biggest stars in Cage Warriors, but you could have a few future big stars, and you have a lot of very, very good fights as well. And the last time I recorded a Cage Warriors preview, I did it with Brad Wharton, the Cage Warriors play-by-play guy, and unfortunately we had to record it twice because about 10 fights fell out. I know so far one Manny Akpan's fight on the second night isn't happening, but they're looking for a replacement for him. I'll talk about him when I get to the second part of the preview here. So that's one. I don't know, by the time this video comes out, there could be 3 or 4 more, but bear with me, and we will get through it here. Let me start on the first night. Let me talk about the main event for a second, because you know, the last time we had a Cage Warriors card, it was supposed to be Paul Hughes versus Jordan Vucinic in the main event. And I suppose if you look at the two of those, they're probably two of the most noteworthy fighters by name in Cage Warriors at the moment. A lot of that is down to the fact that they've both fought before. A lot of that is down to the fact they've both fought Martin Charrier before. And they're both obviously in that red hot featherweight division that Cage Warriors have at the moment. Now, for this one, it doesn't have that main event, but it has a very, very good fight. A very good fight between two guys who are very good, if you want to just put it that way. Justin Burlinson, I remember last year talking, I think I had Jake Smith on the podcast with me, and he was telling me about how good Burlinson is. And honestly, anyone in the UK who you talk to about Justin Burlinson, they'd always tell you how good he is. And unfortunately, he got into the Dana White Contender Series mashup. He had a fight there. He ended up losing in the first round there. And you know what? That Dana White Contender Series is a very, very difficult thing for some people. Like, watching Justin Burlinson's fight, he is a slow, methodical, intelligent fighter. And when you're asked to go out there and you need to get a finish, you need to impress, that doesn't suit some fighters. And I feel like, having watched him there and gone back and watched some of his fights now, it didn't really suit him. It really, really didn't suit him. And I think maybe he's the type of guy, go back, make a run at the Cage Warriors 170 title and try to get it that way. Like, he has some very good wins in his career. Beat Josh Plant in his second fight over in Bama back in 2017. You know, Josh Plant, very, very tough guy. He's fought Kiefer Crosby and a good few guys as well. A very tough guy on this scene. You know, he beat David Bear the middle of last year in the Cage Warriors fight, and that was his only Cage Warriors fight before he went over to the UFC. He fought once in Bellator as well before that against Wendell Lewis, and he was supposed to fight Conrad Iwanowski. He was supposed to fight Bobby Pallett. He was supposed to fight Aaron Kelly. There was something with his contract with Bellator, and before he went to Cage Warriors, and then obviously the Dana White Contender Series thing. So it's been a really tough time from 2019 up until 2021. He was kind of on the sidelines. He had 2 years out, basically, looking for fights, getting fights getting cancelled and all. So, you know, I always see a fighter like that and I'm thinking Cage Warriors. Like, Cage Warriors is the place for them. They'll get 2 to 3 fights, or 3 to 4 fights even every year, if they're fit and ready and want it, and they can get on that path to get to the UFC, which is seemingly where he wants to go. You know, he was in Bellator and it didn't work out, so then the next path is to take that way to the UFC, and he's in the right place to go and to get there. Watching his opponent Daniel Skibinski, this is a tough fight. 18-6 in his career. he has beaten some really, really, really good guys. He's beaten Pavel Paulak. He's beaten Davy Gallen, who I watched fighting in Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and had a great win over Charlie Leary. So he's fought some really, 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 really good guys. Even early in his career, he fought Thomas Ramakowski, who's gone on to do really good things over in KSW. And, you know, you just look at the records of some of the guys he's fighting, 13-3, guys with 25 fights, guys with 18. He even fought John Michael Shield, who maybe is a little bit longer in the tooth now, let's say, as he was back in the day. But coming off a loss in the UAE Warriors in October of last year, had a few fights for them, fought in Babylon as well before that. So now he's coming over to Cage Warriors, and look, when that happens, we can say it again, he's probably looking to get to the UFC, so he'll need to beat Justin Burlinson here. I would say this is, look, as a lot of the Cage Warriors fights are, and lots of MMA fights are these as two very well-rounded guys. I think Skibinski is a guy who will take his time looking for the takedown, whereas Burlinson's more of a take his time looking for the strike kind of a guy. Now, that can change in between fights as well, but I think Skibinski is strong, and, you know, he won his last fight, he won it via ground and pound with big shots. Very, very dangerous guy. I think Burlinson will need to be smart about how he goes about this one. You know, take his time. I believe it's 3 rounds, if I'm not mistaken. It says 3-5 here, but I don't know, is that right? Is that right? 3-5 minute rounds. Yeah, not 5-5. 3-5 minute rounds, yeah. So, you know, take his time as much as he can, I suppose. Again, not give up too much against Skibinski, but, you know, do what he needs to do as well. And I think if Burlinson, look, there's 2 ways this can go. He can either have come out of that Dana White Contender Series fight and it'll G him up and it'll bring him to the next level, or it could set him back a bit. I think he'll G him up and bring him to the next level, but I think Skibinski is a very, very, very tough fight, and I'm looking forward to the odds coming out to seeing what the prices are in this, because it is it's a very interesting fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing that one. The card, the rest of it I'll go down through it, but I don't think it's been lined up yet. It looks like Ed Walls and Liam Gittins are the 2 guys in the co-main event. Gittins lost his, Walls lost his opening 2 fights in Cage Warriors, but that was against Steve Amiable and Aidan Stevens, so that's a pretty tough way to start your career in Cage Warriors. He's down on 135 pounds now. After the Aidan Stevens fight, was at 140, and it was 145 pounds Steve Amiable, so this might be his preferred weight class here, I would say. Liam Gittins, you know, he's been around for a good while now. Look at the guys he has fought over the last while. Kingsley Crawford, you know, got a great win a couple of weeks ago when he was the underdog. I don't think he should have been. Gerardo Fanny, who fought for the title in the fight before that, if I'm not mistaken. Brian Bouland, Imre Somnes, Josh Reed, Adam Amos Singer. He's had some tough matchups, and even more before that as well. I remember watching his debut in Cage Warriors against Kevin Cardero back 3 or 4 years ago now at this stage. But this guy is a really, really good fighter, and he's fought the best of the best in Cage Warriors over the last while, and that's the way they do it in Cage Warriors. So that'll be a very, very interesting fight in that one there. Look, Gittins is a guy, I suppose, who he's heavy hands, and he's a finisher. You know, 6 of his 7 fights have finished inside the distance. And for Walls, you know, he's had 6 finishes out of 10 fights or something like that as well. So it'd be interesting to see how that one goes as well. Very interesting as well. Paul McBain, last time myself and Brad spoke, he was supposed to be fighting Decky McAleenan a couple of weeks ago on short notice. I don't know why it fell through. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Maybe it was because the main event fell through and he just got moved off it. But he's coming in here again. I suppose you could still call it on short notice. It's only a couple of weeks of notice from that one again. But like I mentioned, Steve Amiable earlier on. He's beaten Steve Amiable, beaten Sam Spencer, beaten Coleman Day. You know, he's only losses to Aidan Lee and James Hinden, 2 very, very, very good fighters in that division. James Hinden, I fought for the title a couple of weeks ago. And Paul McBain will be taking on Federico Pasquali. You know, whenever you see an Italian signing for Cage Warriors, and they're like 6-0 or something like that, you know Ian Dean, who's this guy he's after fighting? He's after fighting another good one. And we talk about finishes. 5v6 fights have been finishes. So you know what's going to happen there. That's got to be a very good fight. And for Paull McBain, you know, in that division, at 100, you know, whether he's fighting at 145 pounds or he was going up to 155 pounds for his last fight, that division is wide open again now. Like, will Vucinic be off to the UFC? What's going to happen with Paul Hughes? Where is Charrier? You know, we saw William Gomez actually fighting out in the UAE Warriors last weekend. So that division, there's been a lot of different contenders, a lot of very, very good people in it over the last while, but it's also kind of moving and shaking the whole time as well. So we'll see where that goes. But that could be an interesting fight in that division, especially, I think, for Paull McBain, who is a top contender there. I'll mention a couple of the other fights on the card, and then I will pop back to the Irish fights. I mentioned them all together. Matthew Byfield, who's 3-1, is taking on Hugo Guillon, a 1-0 fighter out of France. There's some very kind of new up-and-coming fighters on this card. Anger Sanchez, who's 0-0, fighting Connor Wilson, 2-1 out of the UK. Omeil Brown, who came in with a big reputation into his last fight against James Sheehan on 2-0. He'd beaten Joshua Wardy before that, who was 3 or 4 fights into his career at that stage. He fought Fabian Edwards back in the amateurs. So it'll be interesting to see him come back in there. He's fighting Dan Hepworth, who lost his pro debut in FCC back in 2019 and hasn't fought since then, but had a very good unblemished 6-0 record as an amateur. So that's an interesting young lads fight there as well. Antonio Sheldon, 5-2, fighting Milad Ahady to open up the card, and then Dean Trueman is back here fighting in the 145 pound division against Giuseppe Ruggeri, who's 7-0 as well. You know, he's fought on a couple of those golden ticket events which have been going on over in the UK. And you know, the guys coming through from that, a lot of them are very, very good fighters. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on against, you know, Dean Trueman, 17 fights into his career. But it feels like he's been around for a lot longer than that. His last 3 fights, if you look at him, George Hardwick, basically the champion. You know, you can nearly call him the interim champion this stage, and Joe McColgan probably wouldn't even disagree with that at 155 pounds. Morgan Charrier, the former champion, one of the best guys they have in the 145 pound division, and Mads Burnell. You know, he's lost the 3 fights, but still, those fighters, like before that, he'd beaten Aidan Lee, beaten Lewis Monarch, some really, you know, fought Adam Vinter back in there, fought Liam James. Some unbelievable names there in this scene on his record. So that's a very, very interesting one. Right, so to the Irish fighters then. Let's talk about the 2 Shelley brothers first of all. Ryan Shelley and Adam Shelley. Adam Shelley is 1-1. Ryan Shelley is 3-0. And these guys came through the taekwondo scene over here. They're fighting out at Team KF in Dublin under Chris Fields and Tom King. Adam Shelley, he lost his opening fight of his career to Kenny Mokahana, who actually fought last week over in, I think was it at UAE Warriors? Let me just check here. It was, yeah, to go to 3-0 in his career. So he's another top prospect coming through. He's actually a brother of Franz Malambo, which a lot of people would know, the former veteran of Bellator and the current champion over in FEN and the Combache tournament winner from last year as well. So, you know, there's good breeding there with Kenny. So he's a top prospect coming through. So no shame in Adam Shelley losing to that one. And Ryan Shelley as well, his brother. Look, watching both of them fight, it's very interesting to see the way they fight with the big, long, open stance and the huge, fast kicks from the outside, and the hands are improving at all times. And look at, you can see him up there behind me. Where is he there? Wonderboy. You know, they remind you a little bit of Wonderboy. The elusive striking on the outside. The thing about it is as well, when you're fighting in Clan Wars and in other places and in smaller shows, you have the smaller cage, and it's a lot tougher. I think them lads will absolutely love getting into the Cage Warriors cage, fighting in that bigger cage, fighting on a more professional show. I think will and not to slate any of the other shows, but you get what I mean, you know. I think that will really, really suit him, and it will suit a game like that as well. I like those type of fighters, as you could see by, the MVP thing behind me, and the Anderson Silva and the Kim one as well. Those are my type of fighters. I love those strikers from the outside, high kickers. So these are lads, whose careers you could follow for years, and we'll see they'll either be very, very good or they won't. But Chris Fields is one of these guys. I don't think if they were ready, he wouldn't be allowing them to fight, or he wouldn't be putting them in that position. And it's a great time for Team KF. What was I going to say? Omran Shaban has signed with him, and Takamandu as well has signed with Cage Warriors. Both of them signed there in the last week. That was reported over in Severe Miss. So a lot of Team KF fighters underway in Cage Warriors at the moment, and it's a big time for Irish MMA in Cage Warriors. On this card as well, Caolan Loughran is fighting Oryakhail on this card. He's 4-0 in his career, but this is maybe the next step of his career, because he fought, some of the cans, we'll say, let's put it that way, on the UK scene to open up his career. His last two fights maybe not as bad, but when you see Reece Street on that record, it's not great. But he's in Cage Warriors now, and that doesn't happen in Cage Warriors. So you could almost say he's making his debut again here. And watching Caolan Loughran, he is a similar type. Do you know what? If the two lads, Shelley brothers, are kind of kicking from the outside, he's kind of punching from the outside. He is like a forward-leaning stance, hits really hard, counters really well. I'm excited, watching some of his fights back today before I do this. This is a guy I'm really excited about, and really excited about seeing him going to the next level and seeing where he can take this career. And Cage Warriors is the perfect place to do that. So big fight here for Caolan Loughran as well. And James Sheehan then, I suppose, is the most senior of the Irish fighters fighting on this card this weekend. He is taking on Karol Michalak, who's another guy who is a very strong wrestler and looks for a lot. Although I watched two of his fights, and now one of them, it was in a cage and he did a lot of wrestling. Another one was in a ring and he did almost no wrestling. So I don't know if it was that was down to the ring or that was down to the opponent and the way he fights. So I'm not... It's tough one. When you see a fighter like that, right, they do two completely different things in two completely different fights. It's tough to know. But for James Sheehan, I don't know, has anyone had a tougher start to their pro career than James Sheehan. In his first... two of his first three fights, he fought the middleweight champion in Cage Warriors after that, Matthew Brown, and he fought Ian Gary in his third fight, went to a decision with both of them. So that tells you how good James Sheehan is. He's a 3-2 record, but that 3-2 record, you can throw that out because of the amount of people he's fought and the quality of wins, or the quality of opponents he has. Forget about that 3-2 record. This guy is a very, very good fighter. As I mentioned, beat Omeil Brown in his last fight. He's on a 2-fight win streak now. If he goes to 3 fights in a row, I think that's more where James Sheehan is. Fighting out of the famed Team Rhino gym in Dublin as well, training with Paul Redmond and training with, Dean Barry is there now, I believe, as well, making his UFC debut in a few weeks. And, Neil Seary and Andy, obviously under the tutelage of Andy Ryan. A great gym for anyone to be at, and I'm looking forward to seeing James Sheehan here again. A very well-rounded fighter, strong, good hands, good wrestling, and good jiu-jitsu as well, the whole lot. Beat obviously Kieran Sturrock by a rear naked choke there in 2020. So and won his other fight as well against Dylan Manning. He won by a rear naked choke as well. So very good on the ground. Right, let's move on to Cage Warriors 136. I suppose this is maybe a less Irish interest one, but the main event here, cracking main event, absolutely cracking main event, and I will get to that in a second. Some of the things on the undercard I will skim through here. Reece McEwan is fighting Sam Spencer. My good friend Harry Williams wrote an article on Sam Spencer. He's had a very tough time over the last while. He hasn't fought since back in 2019, and it's good to see him back. He's had some big fights in Cage Warriors, and it's good to see him back in the and that scene as well, and fighting in FCC and other places as well. Obviously he's taking on Reece McEwan. You've been Reece against Liam Malai. That Manny Akban fight, if you haven't seen Manny Akban, I hope they get him a match up, and I hope they get him back on this card, because this guy, if you could look at the lads behind me again, this guy is Anderson Silva making his fifth fight. He throws spinning kicks, he hits hard, he's one of the most exciting fighters you'll see at this level. He is so fun to watch, and anytime Manny Akban is fighting, I'll be watching. So hopefully Ian Dean and Graham Boylan can find him a matchup here, because I will certainly be tuning in to see him fight on this one. Another interesting name, he's 1-1 on the card, Michael Chukmu, who is a guy who fights out of Newcastle in the north of England, and he's just from all the lads up there telling me he's a very, very good fighter. He's fighting Peter Chiminki, who's 5-1, fighting out of Poland. It'd be interesting to see that one as well. He's fought a few times on the UK scene before, fighting in Cage Steel and other places as well against some good lads. So that's a kind of a stick out one there on that part of the card. Mick Stanton is back as well. He's fighting Alexis Fontes. Stanton has been around the block as well a bit. He's fought Matters Flaminas, fought Aaron Khalid, fought the former champion James Webb. Only made his debut back in 2016, but it feels like he's been around longer than that. Fought Matt Bonner as well. So he's fought a who's who in that division, and it's nice to see him back. Fontes is 4-1. Fighting out of France, and this is his first fight in cage warriors. He fought in Brave back in 2019. Was due to fight a couple of times in between it, but those fights fell out, probably the pandemic again. So there's a lot of fights on this card. You see a lot of, there's Finnish fighters here, there's lads from Poland, there's lads from obviously the UK and France, and the world is opening back, and there's more fighters becoming available, more fights becoming available, and more places on cards as well. I was talking to lads above at Bellator there, Cian Cowley and Lee Hammond and other guys, and they were saying, we spent the last 2 years begging, looking for fights. We couldn't find them anywhere, and now we're getting offered 3 fights in the same weekend and there's fights all over the place. So it's really a great time for local MMA again. It is it's back in force really, and it's great to see these fighters being able to get out, and as well the fighters who maybe we haven't been able to see on the scene in the last while are popping back into it again. Anderson Castro, I suppose, might be another one of those. He lost last time out to Andreas Binder, who's another one of the top Irish prospects coming through. He's fighting Rustam Akman coming up in the show very soon, so it'll be interesting to see him there. He lost to Sam Slater a while back, but he's he fought Pedro Carvalho as well on the Cage Legacy, in Cage Legacy as well. He's fighting out of of Ireland as well, so it'd be interesting to see how he goes in Cage Warriors, and he doesn't have an easy matchup to start off against Alexei Mantekivi, who was a top fighter. He fought Reece McKean, his comeback fight to Cage Warriors. Before that, he fought Mason Jones, so he's not getting any easy ones. He lost to Jack Grant. He's a win over Soren Back, so that tells you how good that Alexei Mantekivi is. And that was, it was a few years ago now at this stage, 2016, but still a win over Soren Back is a win over Soren Back, and that's a big an opportunity for Castro there, and we'll see how he gets on. Kieran Lister back here again. He's fighting Jan Koenings, whose name I absolutely butchered, but Kieran Lister is always a fixture in the 155-pound division. Okay, he lost to Figlak and he lost to Joe McColgan, but that draw against Decky McAleen still keeps him in there. I'd love to see that fight maybe ran down again. We'll see what happens in this one, but his opponent Jan hasn't fought since 2018. He fought Philip Malpeter in Cage Warriors back in the day, so it's interesting to see how he looks. He was supposed to fight last year, but with that long out of the cage, it'll be an interesting watch. Adam Cullen then, one of the best up-and-comers in Cage Warriors against Ahady. Luke Riley is a guy who always sticks out to me. He's fighting out of Paddy Pimblett's gym in Liverpool, Next Generation, and he looks superb in his opening couple of fights. He fought Camille Winishak, who is an Irish prospect coming through out of Team KF, and when you beat him, you're a very good fighter. That was his first fight. That was back in last October. He fought in December again, so he's back out here fighting against Jack Elgin, who is also 2-0, who won in the Cage Warriors Academy a couple of fights starting in 2020. In the amateurs, he fought Nick Bagley and Nathan Fletcher and a few others as well. Kieran Mulholland, who's the top prospect here, fought Mohammed Mukayev even in the amateurs. He lost most of those fights, but still he has that experience, and that should be an interesting test for Luke Riley there. Dylan Nazan is 7-0. He's won his last 2 fights in a row in Cage Warriors, beat Josh Reed and Scott Malone, so he's one of the top prospects coming through. He's fighting Raminsan Bruno from fighting out of Spain, but originally from Brazil, and you've seen his record. He's a lot of submissions, a few arm bars, a few knee bars and things like that. Has beaten Pedro Minga, so yeah, that'll be an interesting one as well. Right, the one guy I could not find any tape on is Dan Juice, and maybe someone, if they can find it for me. He's 7-1. I couldn't find any of those 8 fights. I couldn't find him anywhere. He's fighting crazy harsh Josh Reed. Josh Reed, another guy, if you haven't seen his fight against Nathaniel Wood, go to Fight Pass right now and watch it. This guy is one of the most exciting fighters in the world. One of the Welsh fighters doing so well at the moment, and I would love to see Josh Reed get a big run of fights and get maybe into a title fight or get a run to the UFC or somewhere like that. He deserves it. Josh Reed fight, I guarantee it'll be fun. I've never seen his opponent. I couldn't find him. I looked for a video on him. So, unless he's terrible, this should be a good fight. And in the top 2 fights of the weekend, Aaron Abbey and Gerardo Fanny in the co-main event first. Fanny came into Cage Warriors, and I watched a couple of his fights for his signing. He looked really, really good, but he met Jack Cartwright, and got beaten down badly by Jack Cartwright, but he's bounced back and he's won 2 in a row, beat Conor Hignett and Liam Gittins, finished both of them in the second round. So that's a big run there for him. He actually lost to Dan Juiz a couple of fights ago, and I haven't been able to find that one either. I was trying to kill 2 birds with the one stone, but no. But Aaron Abbey as well has been on a good run over the last while. Okay, he lost to Sam Creasy, but beating Samir Fedine, he made his debut all the way back now, it seemed 2013, but he had a bit of time off in the middle of that as well, fighting a lot in FCC and Cage Warriors. He's really worked his way up to where he is at the moment, beating the likes of Conor Higdon, fought Andy Young back in 2016. So he's a guy who deserves that type of opportunity, and in a co-main event here, a big fight. He could be, the winner of this could be fighting for the 135 pound title next. So massive fight there in that one. And in the main event, Jati Milan and Christian Leroy Duncan, both undefeated. Jati Milan 8-0, came in his last fight as the underdog, and if you watch my betting show here, I gave him to win against Matthew Bonner, and that he did. It's very hard, but waits for that big takedown, and is really good on the ground. Strong game. Size might be an issue here against Christian Leroy Duncan. He's not the biggest middleweight in the world, and Christian Leroy Duncan, he is a big middleweight now. Milan 5'11", Christian Leroy Duncan 6'2", and we've seen what he did in his last 3 fights. Look, okay, one of them was against Will Curry, and it was a bit weird, but they had the rematch. And, he destroyed him basically in that matchup, overpowered him. And then Justin Moore, if anyone has seen a picture of Justin Moore, overpowering him is a tough thing to do. And that's what Christian Leroy Duncan did there as well. So this could be a real battle if there is a takedown battle. And, maybe they'll, outweigh each other, and it'll turn into a kickboxing matchup or something like that. But, this is a very interesting fight. Both guys hit hard as well. I don't know which way this one will go, honestly. There's a little bit more on Jati Milan because he's been around, for a few fights longer, but I think Christian Leroy Duncan is a very, very good fighter as well, and I find it hard to pick a winner in that one, but we can tune in and we can see who wins it anyway, and that's for the 185 pound title. That title is a title that's been kind of passed around over the last while. Obviously, we know Matt Bonner had the title before that. He won it from Matthias Frederick, and James Webb had it. So, James Webb is still knocking around there. I don't know what Matthias Frederick is doing, because, he lost that one fight, and that was back in 2001, the summer of 2001. So, it's less than a year, I suppose. So maybe there's no need to panic yet, but, everyone thought he was kind of getting to the UFC. 39 years of age is the only thing with him, but he's such a good fighter. It would be a shame if we didn't see him back, but hopefully we will see him back, and maybe he could fight the winner of this main event. So Yeah, as I say, I'll try to keep you updated on any of the fights that fall out or anything like that over on Twitter. Give me a follow at Sean Sheehan BA. Cage Warriors will have the update anyway as well throughout the week. And Friday and Saturday night over on UFC Fight Pass. Both of these cards are on, so definitely tune in for them if you haven't watched Cage Warriors before. If you're over in the UK or in the US or somewhere like that, it's definitely great. It's great production, great commentary and everything. It's always a fun watch, so definitely tune in and check out Cage Warriors. Alright, I will leave it at that. Thank you to everybody for listening and watching. My name is Sean Sheehan for ShareDog.com, and I'll see you all next time.